Welcome to Triple Canopy and welcome to Live Feed. My name is Zach Wilkes. I'm the manager of public engagement.
I'm Momo Ishiguro. I'm a contributing editor. And I'm Go First. So we wanted to provide a little bit of context on why we're doing this event and why we're doing it here to start off. And if you're new to Triple Canopy or you're not familiar with our history, we've been around for about 16 years. And one of the things that we were most known for in our early days is our critical stance on technology, more notably our critique of major technology corporations and the platforms they were building that were increasingly ubiquitous and having a domineering effect on our lives. Cut to 2024, they're still around, still doing their thing. But there's a lot more shared language around those criticisms now, and we hear a lot more about imagining a world without these social media platforms and these corporations, most notably, as an example, yesterday when the House voted to ban TikTok, which felt like the most expedient decision that group of people has made in a very long time. But in terms of imagining a world without these platforms and these companies, as someone who cares about internet culture and has for a long time, sometimes it makes me wonder, well, in a world where all those things go away, what would we want to keep about internet culture? What does internet culture look like and what imprint does it make if we take those platforms away? And I think probably everyone has their own definition and answer to that. And if you want to chat about that afterwards, I'd be super excited, so let me know. But for us, it feels like something that you know when you see it. It encompasses things ranging from information wormholes, obscure histories, forgotten cultural artifacts, maybe even a tiny meaningful observation made by somebody who doesn't make content for a living that changes your perspective on something. So this is sort of an experiment to try to capture that feeling, try to be together in a room and kind of hit those points and experience those forms of culture together, IRL, in person.
So Momo and I are both musicians, so one way that we engage with feeds and one thing that the feeds kind of gives us naturally is music content. So that can be everything from artists we should check out, people commenting on it, people talking about lesser known musical histories, weird compositional techniques, or people racing to create the Crank That Soulja Boy beat from scratch. So tonight's presenters, performers, and designers are each inspired by music and sound in different ways. For some, it informs their practice. For others, it's just something that's going on in the background throughout it all. So the event itself, the way that it's going to go tonight, is going to kick off with a series of short presentations and performances by Aristilde Kirby, Kimberly Alidio, and Amber Flannery Field. While this is all going on, the game designer Blake Andrews is in that office over there creating a video game in real time using Guitar Hero controllers, which we'll be able to play at the end of the event. So Momo and I are each going to introduce the performers, and then the performers will do their thing. We'll take a pause for about 10 minutes at the end so that we can set up the game over here. And then you're welcome to hang out, have a drink, play the game. It's going to be, we have 4 controllers. We brought our guitar stands from home. Please play the game. It'll be a lot of fun. It'll be weird and good. All right, so can you actually hit the next slide for me? Thank you. Aris Kirby is a poet from the Bronx and the author of Daisy and Catherine. She has published chapbooks with Best American Experimental Writing 2020, Belladonna, and Black Warrior Review. Her writing, art, and performance work has been featured in or with Miguel Ebro Gallery, The Poetry Project, the Haus der Kulturen der Welt, don't speak German, Entrance, Macmillan, and as a part of Text zur Kunst Velvet Voice Club at the Roter Salon Volksbund. Eris.
Just gonna take a little moment to get set up. Well, actually, first, before I do anything. Hi, everyone. My name is Aristilde Kirby. It's very nice to meet you all. Thank you all for coming. I really, truly do appreciate it. What can I say? My name is Aristilde Kirby. I was born 33 years ago in the Bronx, New York, not too far from here. And Thank you. And not too far from here, at Bronx Lebanon Hospital. And I was born to Mark Wright and Leela Kirby. I was 9 pounds, and I was born via cesarean section. Give it up for me. On the 11th, I will be reborn again, but more on that later. Psychologists say that birth is inherently traumatic. It is for the person in labor. It is for the person helping the labor happen. Yeah. It's kind of traumatic for everyone. Sorry. It is even for the people who watch, who took part in the baby's genesis, even if they weren't there. The ritual of the germ is creation. Come now. She's shy. There you are. Yeah. The ritual of germ is creation. A spark, another, some information is passed, signs are exchanged. A sign inscribes itself on the body. My coworker once told me that, like recently, that I was blushing. And I wonder if I'd ever blushed before that. I don't have that sort of interior look at my face. Y'all can look at my face. I can't look at my face unless I look at a mirror. But I've never felt it before. But I believe my coworker. I don't know why my coworker would ever lie to me about something like that. We wait, more meetings, more sing-alongs, growth, aid, trials, tribulations, trust, a bond, sex, however actualized or abstracted, or maybe something ruptures the process. Life is a stage on which being happens. Or doesn't. Abortion is as much as a necessary miracle as birth in a world where creation and being are constantly being threatened by precarity, malaise, fatality, and the buckering flickers of the human spirit. It feels weird, doesn't it? Being lit and not knowing if another will honor your burning and tend tenderly the conditions that proliferate your existence. My world's on fire. How about yours? That's the way I like it, and I never get bored. What do you make of it? What does one make of oneself? Sometimes I like to hold myself to light in hopes that I can be a bit of a prism for you in the shadow of your time here. What does that make me? Well, before I tell you that, I will tell you this. Everyone see? Cool. Hello. This is Somber Tones, track 1, Body of Work, by one of my favorite artists, Lupe Fiasco. And whether you're near or far, thank you for joining me. Where's the camera? Oh, Hi, thank you for joining me. uh, yeah, I will do this real quick. This is like my model. There's an artist that I found on Instagram. His name is Mosa Cannibalism, and it's like a teraphim maker. I'll get into what a teraphim is in a little bit, but they sort of make sort of like these idols, household gods. And I just thought it was funny. It's just like she's just like cheekily pushing up the breasts of this thing. Oh, she's pushing up her own breast and the things that of this thing that she made. So she's my icon. Tetsuo and Youth. I'm here to talk about one of my favorite albums, one of my favorite songs from one of my favorite albums. So, Tetsuo and Youth, syntactically, is a title that references food and liquor, Lupe Fiasco's very first album. But in terms of semantic content, it is more abstract. On one hand, Tetsuo is a reference to the character from Akira, who begins the movie as an insecure motorbike punk and ends as an extremely powerful human with psychic abilities. Akira, the most powerful of them all, takes Tetsuo into another dimension and reins him in after he loses control of his powers and becomes a mutated mass of flesh. Tetsuo's struggle throughout the movie is coming to terms with his identity and the onset of these abilities. In a way, it's a metaphysical puberty. On the other hand, there is a sense of concord with the other primary word in the title, youth, more of a concept, an ideal more than anything else. Maintaining what made you appealing as a rapper initially is important to achieving a strong core fan base and career longevity. It also points to an insecurity with aging into irrelevance or becoming washed, quote unquote, ability-wise. The concept of aging, especially in a young form such as rap, where many young rappers died due to street-related causes, is contested just as it is a certain fact. Not just for the person, but for the music. These days we hear so much of music that comes and goes. Yet we are conscious of music in a way that we've never been before. What captures attention and holds it in our art within an era dictated by all the trappings of late capitalism in a world racked by ecological and political disaster? Food and Liquor, Lupe's first album, was about the yin and yang of what we consume, how it nourishes and how it destroys us. Tetsuo and Youth, lyrically, thematically, artistically, is an album that hinges on the word and concept of Renaissance, a nod not to only the art period, but to the literal meaning of the word stems, a rebirth. It is Lupe taking stock of himself from a street-based gritty youth to the release from the hell of his major label, to realign with what Lupe does best: concepts, storytelling, abstraction. Tetsuo and Youth is food and liquor dipped in a vat of acid, the drug. It is lyrical fitness on steroids spiked with LSD. It is his vault back into being a critical darling. It is an album for the rap geniuses and a doctoral essayist. Famously, after being threatened with being cast in a label purgatory again due to Lupe not being able to make another hit that satisfied the label of Atlantic Records, the legendary decentralized hacktivist group Anonymous threatened them with a massive leak of information if Lupe didn't get a release date for Tetsuo and Youth. It came out on January 20th, 2015. In the last session of his Philosophy Someday Twitter conversation series, Lupe revealed the art for the album, a painting, which is right here, called Uomo Mangiato Tigre, or Italian for man-eating tiger. The release of the cover also introduced another aspect of Lupe as a painter. It was revealed he took up the art as a way to exercise creativity while his music was kept in captivity, and as a lifelong fan of the practice. For him, art and painting was an extension of his meaning-making process of layered symbolism and wild lyricism that he was known for in rap. To begin, he gave the fans the title and let them analyze what it meant on Twitter. Here are some crowdsourced interpretations of the painting. Of the name of the painting, anyway. The definition I see from it stems back to tigers being pouched by man. So eating man means self-preservation and survival. Man is the top, but sometimes we behave like animals, although we say we are superior than the man-eating becoming tiger. Because you can look at a phrase man-eating tiger two different ways. It's like a double entendre of a title. The man equals the people in power keeping you as the tiger contained and essentially eating the life and inspiration from you. Truly depends. Everyone possesses both characters. Maybe the man and tiger are one. This could be all about self-destruction if that were the case. As a brief aside, in Julio Cortázar's story Bestiario, or Bestiary, a character named Isabel is sent to a palatial mansion belonging to some relatives because her lungs can't stand the city air, and childcare is expensive. The issue with this is that the mansion has a tiger roaming throughout it. The parents don't seem to be too worried. She's greeted by Nino, a boy her age, her aunt Rima, her husband El Nene, translated as the kid, who spends a lot of time locked in a study, and as the story proceeds is revealed to have an ambiently oppressive hold on the people in the house. A member of the state staff alerts the family as to where the tiger is on the premises. Isabel, during a furious moment of play, manages to mistakenly hit the ball into the window of the kid's study. The kid is furious, but they say it was an accident, and Nino comes and takes the blame. Later, after winning a game of checkers against Rima, the kid comes down and proceeds to beat Nino, blaming him for the accident, all the while staring into the eyes of his terrified wife. Isabel is disturbed on more than one level, but is pissed that her loved interest was abused. One day, after collecting bugs, the person who tracks the tiger running late tells Isabel about the whereabouts of the tiger in the building. She proceeds to tell the family that's in the kid's study, but the kid scoffs, though he accepts that there's nothing he can do about it. He announces that he's going into the library right next to it. It turns out that Isabel lied to the family, and as a result, the kid found himself in the same room as the tiger. In his struggle to get out, it kills him. Bestiary is a story about psychological repression. The point of this anecdote is to highlight how oppression can, with skill and finesse, be inverted. Sometimes the tiger eats the man, sometimes the man eats the tiger. It's also like another participant in Philosophy Sunday said, it depends on who is saying it. Everyone can say they're the man or the tiger depending on what's convenient. To this, Lupe replied, very interesting hashtag Twitter gold. That's like when he puts his little gold star on your comment. The changing of identities, adaption or masquerading. The idea that signification is meta-real, and by that I don't mean hyper-real. I mean that meaning is the abstract sub and superstrate that formats our lives around appearances. We call this identity. Tetsuo and Youth is proof that those who create meaning create existence on the state of life. Existence is more than a person sailing on time's arrow, pruning in the wind. Existence as signs of life form as traces, in conflict to change the inscription etched against the persona by material, social, genetic causes, and more. Those who can change their identities, and everyone here can, change the strata of meaning a lot expressed large. Halfway through the session, Lupe challenged viewers to identify what the color and shape fields in the painting symbolized. Symbolized. He said that there is a man, there is a tiger, there is flesh, blood, bone, and my two favorites, a soul and technology. There is also some brain in there, gray matter. The man is the textured skull. The blood is the obtuse red square. The bones are the long white lines. The flesh is the pink rhomboid to the right. The technology is the large triangle with the steely sheen to the top left that the printer unfortunately could not reproduce. Kinetically, the soul is the blue streak, curiously inflected with pink and red. The tiger of the orange is the orange and black stripe descends. It intersects it, but it does not intercept it. The soul is immaterial, beyond the brackets of singular sex, and is transmogrified, altered from the skull that contained it. The soul escapes the sweep of carnage. It elevates and lowers diagonally askance to a place beyond the canvas. It is a painting that succeeds with its boldness of its simplicity, the angular sharpness of its complexity. It's a fount of semiosis. Speaking of those who changed their identities, in the same show, exhibiting his painting work that he advertised at the end of this Philosophy Sunday in Chicago, there was a painting of who else but Chelsea Manning. Lupe had this to say about womaning. The inspiration came directly from particular Warhol or Marilyn Monroe at the MoMA, and this is the quote at the bottom of the thing. The meaning behind the work for me is about our roles in society, about how those roles and identities can be reversed and redecided as the consequences that come along with that process. Chelsea's quote-unquote double agency as a covert intelligence officer and spy, as well as the overt duality of man becoming woman, is something that I felt needed to be captured and recontextualized. She encapsulates the anti-heroes of society, sitting up in the heights of mythology, simultaneously demonized and forgiven. In this statement, the double agency, quote-unquote, he highlights is what makes Chelsea extraordinary, how she's able to walk between the margins of worlds at a high level, damage empires and ossified ways of thought by shifting the context around her, and by experimenting with knowledge, the leaks, as well as the limits, the borders of the meaning of the self. You'll see this in body of work lyrically, but this position harkens back to Lupe's own position as a person, someone who has come from the ghettos of Chicago to rub elbows and share space with cultural and financial elites, someone who has allegedly cooperated in illicit and illegal activity. And Lupe even alludes to some sort of criminal past in his music time again as a source for his personal lore. But he's a rapper wholly dedicated to being as good of a person and as good of a rapper he can be. A force for it, for everyone else. He prides himself on never putting bullshit in a game, of being a very atypical rapper in terms of his social engagement, and how he uses his platform, and what and even how he raps about things. The most number one valuable skill in music is reinvention. Womaning shows that to reverse fortunes and perception, that for Lupe to reverse his fortunes and his perception that was damaged in his Atlantic Records run, he had to learn new skills and advance his craft for his own sake. I consider this painting right here an alternative cover to Tetsuo in Youth. Because as you may notice, it directly references the George Condo paintings of Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy was also an album where a rapper leaned into a very Baroque style in pursuit of the highest air of sophistication and expression. And from the grand presentations to the lush, stylistically shifting beats, to the freezes of the features. Fuck Kanye, by the way. TNY is Lupe's version of that album. It's tapping into an energy akin to Chelsea Manning's changing of her sex, the power of reinvention, of renaissance, of renaissance. With that, Lupe hones to surpass his limits, a la Tetsuo becoming an immensely powerful meaning-making entity that exalts his past into legend. As he asked, adaptation or masquerading? What's the difference? The energy lies between those two and many more terms. Consider Roger Caillois' interpretation of insects' genetic evolutions, who create patterns to dissuade, scare, or cloak themselves from predators. Art, as we know it, has been almost totally denaturalized as a form of survival because of capitalism. But in Lupe's pivot to painting, we see him preserve his will to make intricate meanings and augment their strength by doing something parallel, but totally different for the sheer reason that his record label wouldn't really let him be a rapper much at all. Never mind the rapper he wanted to be himself. It shifted his entire... Oh, okay. I thought it wasn't working for a second. It shifted his entire body of work from here on out. So, yeah, not that one. Where are you? Ah, there you are. No, there you weren't. Where'd you go? Ah, there you are. Last one. Thought you'd get away from me, huh? Other way. Cool beans. The song body of work on track 7 is track 7 on Tetsuo and Youth. It clocks in at 5 minutes, 54 seconds. The song is produced by the producer Symbolic One and his son Von Beats. The former has had a major hand in creating Kanye West's Power and Guilt Trip, Beyonce's Best I Never Had and I'm That Girl, as well as the songs Blur My Hands and the next song on this album, Little Death. Curiously, the song features Troy Irons, who now as an artist goes by Grayskin and actually started transitioning around 2 years ago. Body of work begins with the sound of screamer fireworks filling the sky and detonating. There's a quick crossfade into a part of Troy's hook, which goes, Closet full of bones, don't try to put them back together, try to put them back together. And I'll just bite my tongue, so I'll wear it like a scarlet letter. Letter, I've always loved you. Fireworks signify a celebration, a burst of noise and multicolor wisping sparks in the dark, usually commemorating a holiday. I'm going to be a little pedantic and remind you that holiday stems from Old English words for holy and day. Capitalism, as you know, has made it such that holidays serve less as days that are set aside to exact religious rite as festival and more as consumerist events. One thing is that major holidays, even in the modern world, offered a temporary abolishment of work, at least for many. Working on holidays is not uncommon, and I would know that because a good portion of my work history is in warehouses. If you work on Amazon in a floor capacity, especially during the overnight shifts, you are likely to be in the gradation of the middle class at most. It takes labor to keep the country running, and the infra or shadow economies of industrial work, transport services, or say, the drug trade, do not stop. More on that in a bit. The chorus, or as commonly known in rap and urban music, or pop music in general, as the hook, because Black music influence has permeated everything that begins with an ambiguous deferral and, because Black music influence has permeated everything. It begins with an ambiguous deferral and challenge, a reference to the phrase skeletons in the closet. Why would one not want to put them back together? Perhaps there's a fear that putting the skeleton back together would grant the dead speech to disclose how they got that way. Other terms that are related to this one are closeted, as hiding some truth or of a sexually related nature. Elephant in the room, as a predilection for others to not acknowledge something obvious. The October surprise, think of the revelation of Georgia Senate Republican nominee Herschel Walker saying he was 100% pro-life when in reality he had paid for his wife's 2009 abortion by his own son, Christian. Or the phrase, nigga in the woodpile, a term that has very understandably sharply fallen out of favor that stems from racist riffing from the boom of the Underground Railroad, means of Black people absconding from slavery disguised in supplies carried by freight. Tattoo on Youth is about that curious cross-section of extraordinary meaning made in the margins as a golden mean. These four examples, in my opinion, form a kind of schema for how Lupe makes meaning in a track. A lot of associative play with understood terms, taken literally, figuratively, and even contorted in new ways. In a way, of course, the Black candidate for the Republican Party whose symbol is an elephant is hiding the fact that he aborted a child. You couldn't even call it a skeleton, but you know what I mean. Whilst trying to become an influential figurehead in state government, despite swearing he was 100% pro-life, the hypocrisy of such a phrase as he vies for a position where he would gladly corrode the rights of those who can gynecologically reproduce and other forms of genderized care. Of course, the same party and school of thought that damns affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives regularly puts forward and endorses people like this, and more so conspiracy can see themselves in this figurehead to vote against their interests in this neoliberal, neoconservative hellscape to ultimately benefit those who would say the N-word most likely publicly to another Black person, and certainly in private amongst a company of others. They would take the woodpile, make a cross, coat it in gasoline, and set it aflame. One thing we can say that, no matter the demographic, that assimilating and participating in a structure isn't the way to freedom. Lupe makes meaning like this. And in the intro and the hook, an identity forms through a voice coded as female as just one of the central characters of a song in the liminal space between life and death. Is she a zombie? Is she just cocaine chic? It's hard to say, and the ambiguity that is the spread that makes the bread of the song taste rich. And what about me? I had to read The Scarlet Letter in high school. I really hated that book. The proto-feminism the teacher managed to suck out of it was great, but it was a boring, dry book that made with antiquated language and story formatting. I can see it was referred to in the lyrics because the preacher in the story who impregnated Hester gains sympathy for those who have sinned, even as he is burdened by his. Hester somehow comes across as purer than others who judge her. At the time, I dated girls who would just magically come out as bi or lesbian after breaking up with me. I wore girl pants, and I was made fun of I wore girl pants kind of like these, that I was made fun of for by the white people in the truck stop Georgetown I lived in. I experimented with makeup. I was, as much as money could allow, what was called a scene kid, quote unquote. At the time, yeah, I admit it, scene kids. Where are all my scene kids at? Okay, some of you. Don't leave me out here stranded alone. Goddamn. Yeah. At the time, I was more into streaming the song Hester Prynne by Los Angeles deathcore band As Blood Runs Black on MySpace. Even if almost 200 years later, the vocalist, who I'm sure read the book in high school too, at the same time, would not extend that fictional character any sympathy. Ridiculous. Before I knew it, even back when I was a kid, I was what called trans people call an egg. Someone with the potential to transition who is lying dormant. Existence on the stage of life is born of a consciousness and a confidence. That fact I wouldn't get until I was an undergrad. I started transitioning on Valentine's Day in 2015, a few weeks after this album came out. After I was out of my mother's house and able to make my own decisions, for better and for worse. I was intrinsically attracted to the song, a true deep cut at the core of the album. So the song in my life, and taking place in holidays alike, there was a lot to celebrate. I took the spirolactone and the estrogen I ordered in bulk from an online pharmacy I found out about in a thread on the image board 420chan. The medicine shipped from Sweden, Mexico, and India often. I got to work on my own personal renaissance. Oh, and in the hook, it goes, closet full of ounce, like they shaved the formant off of the beginning of the word to make it sound like ounce. So it's kind of like a double entendre. If you look at the lyric book, it says bones, but it says ounce in the actual proceeding of the song. So it's just another cocaine reference. Yeah, he's dope. What can I say? Yeah. Oh, and in a hook, the B for bones is shaved out, so it sounds like O's. O's is a code word, and I already said this, for packs of cocaine. And now, I'm going to perform for you this first verse. Other way, Aris. The other way. Accordions. All right. I've always loved you. Quiet in the court for the courtship, marriage of the dork and the gorgeous. Took her from the king of the corpses. He revolved jumped the wall of the fort with the horses. This was foretold. Bojangles was tapping in Morse code. At least to the madman genius. Tap top secrets in more gold, all of you. From the guts of the mother, Campbell should move her undercover. With a $3,000 son, she just want to love her and somebody else to come and try and drug her. Take off the grill, she's done. Pill celebrating, we won. In the system of the women, never knew he had it in him. Is condition in the world that they make him become. None of you. Cocaine and new high-tech ways smoke a whole things. I've always loved you. From the control range to make radio heads with gold brains, all of you. The Part E4 Jags on gold chains, developing nicks from a whole name. God is great, but it snakes on my soul plane. Oh. Usually I would do my crowd dom ship and be like, you can't clap, but it's fine. Fireworks symbolize the fulfillment of desires. Marriage is what some would say arguably the ultimate holiday, no matter how secularized, in that the event achieved the temporary but total abolishment of work. Unfortunately, well, at least for the people participating, unfortunately, depending on how hard you want to go, weddings can cost a lot of money, and in true capitalist fashion have engendered an industry all their own. But it's true. Marriage seems to be one of the only holidays societies truly respect. Even if the function of marriage has changed in substantial ways through the ages, residues of its past remain. Most centrally, though, a marriage is a ritual. Lupe and his muse, sitting in a tree. Kissing. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby in a baby carriage. All jokes aside, that's the flow of events that the song's narrative adheres to, at least in the most marginal and abnormal ways. Lupe's character in the narrative performs the reverse of Persephone's abduction on his muse, recovering her from the lord of the underworld, criminal or mythic. It has the inflections of medieval chivalry and thus legend, with the clip of the wild whinnying of the horse. I'm not doing the wild whinnying of the horse. Can I do it? That's the best I can do. Foretold as a word choice seems to connotate a lore dimension. Bojangles, if you don't remember or know, was a world-famous black tap dancer whose popularity allowed him to transcend and challenge many racial barriers, but was harshly criticized for capitulating to minstrel stereotypes. Bojangles himself resented this because to even face these white audiences and to even attempt to seduce them into entertainment, into seeing his innate worth as a person, he said, took great strength. The implication by Lupe here is that in Bojangles taps, there's a secret code that allows you to find gold or other mystic secrets, which underscores his far-out thought about what art can and does do, in a Bruce Nauman sort of way. Bojangles also helped the Dallas Police Department lobby for its first black police officer, but whatever. This brings us to the reference to 1993's noir movie starring Lawrence Fishburne, Deep Cover. It also brings us to another reference in Luc Besson's 2014 sci-fi action movie Lucy, starring who else but Scarlett Johansson. Lucy also brings us a reference to AL 288-1, more commonly known as Lucy or Dinakesh in Amharic, an early female human ancestor from 3.2 million years ago, who was far more recently discovered by paleontologist who else but Donald Johanson, no relation, in modern-day Ethiopia. The bone reconstruction possibility in the hook gains more resonance in light of this reference, as Lucy had to be dug up and reconstructed by the paleontology team. 40% of her was found and fossilized. She was named by a woman named Pamela, as they celebrated Lucy's discovery, in the distance, she got the name because they were blasting the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. In the movie Lucy, Scarlett Johansson, I'm sorry, spoilers if you haven't seen this movie from 2014. Scarlett Johansson is offered up as an unwitting drug mule by her terrible, debt-owing, cowboy hat-wearing boyfriend and abducted by a gang of South Koreans. She is swept into an advanced drug ring where she is incapacitated. Then, as packages of a new artificial drug are sewn into her abdomen, she is told by the gang superiors, of course headed by a white British man, that she will be given to a different country to deliver the goods. In scuffles with the gang, the drug leaks into her bloodstream. At this point, she begins to develop supernatural strength, speed, perception, and more. The drug consists of a chemical named pH4. Something she is told by a doctor trying to take is produced in quantities by pregnant women during their 6-week of pregnancy to provide fetuses with the energy to develop to babies. This movie is about expanding her consciousness into the universe and abandoning her humanity, going back in time to meet the literal Lucy and literally having a Michelangelo creation of the atom moment, and then witnessing the Big Bang. Oh, and falling in love with a cop. Can we do the Michelangelo? Can someone hit me with that? Thank you. No, it's fine. Beep. E.T. phone home. In the movie Deep Cover, Lawrence Fishburne plays a cop looking for a promotion. He's doing an interview with a DEA agent who is looking for someone who goes deep undercover into the California drug world to rise through the ranks to depose the West Coast's strongest trafficker, Anton Gallegos, whose family member is a prominent South American politician. Lawrence Fishburne's character begins dealing cocaine. He gets so deep in the game, he disidentifies with being a cop. His best friend becomes a lawyer who gets him out his first legal jam, played by Jeff Goldblum, unfortunately a Zionist. People just keep on disappointing me. Goldblum's character and Fishburne's character have tension over a shared romantic interest in Betty, the black manager of an art dealership being used as a front to launder money. The $3,000 son line is a reference to a minor character in the movie who lives in the motel Fishburne's character stays at, a woman who's addicted to crack and a prostitute named Belinda, who tries to sell Fishburne her son for $3,000. Take her off the grill, she's done, is a reference to a scene in the first act of the movie where one of the underbosses of Gallegos shows Lawrence Fishburne's character, a woman he dopes up heavily to take advantage of. Fishburne's character says this as a way to get up to ease up on her. Lupe's character as a super trapper in a song characterized by deconstructed trap drums, one who sells drugs, finds a way to smuggle coke in a way a la Lucy, while clearly referencing the fact that he's in a position similar to Fishburne's character in Deep Cover, in a fucked up position that life has placed him in, and he's forced to do his best even while doing his worst. Noir is often marked by these contradictions and the psychological quandaries. He even manages to come in contact with a more covert way to traffic drugs. Peep the Radiohead reference. But Lupe, the writer, also, unfortunately, is not. God damn. Get it together. Get it together, Tom. But Lupe the writer and Lupe the artist's real goal is to develop nicks from a whole name. He's not just a dealer, but he's a rapper too, to sell the package that Lupe's character is a genuine and comes from a real place. To park 84 Jags on gold chains is one of two references in the song to the cover of the painting of the album, Man Eating Tiger. This line reminds me of an excerpt of Fishburne's character says deep into the movie, which is a direct quote from Donald Gaines's autobiography, Whoreson. The jungle creed says the strongest feed on any prey it can, and I was branded beast at every feast before I became a man. This quote, paired with the line, highlights the new ethos and what survival looks like in a supposed concrete jungle, a Venn diagram that converges the thickets of the wilderness with the savage, capitalist, fake wonderland of city life. To whip up in that vintage Jaguar car, rocking gold chain shows the droppings of success. You have to be consumed by the car to operate it. But Lupe flips this dynamic on his head. He makes the trappings don't make him. Or do they? It's a tenuous sense of dominance, and those are the spoils of his survival. Lupe's character is goaded on by the floating voice of his muse in the ad-libs. The relationship between he and her character is based on Common's I used to love her, from his 1994 album Resurrection, speaking of Renaissance. The acronym stands for hip-hop and its essence is real. On another song by the Teriyaki Boys, later featuring Kanye West, the Japanese rappers would translate her as honto I rap, loosely translated as real rap. Also keep in mind that not too long ago, at this point, Nas released an album called Hip Hop is Dead, where he knelt over is dropping a rose on its grave. One of its lines from the song is, hip hop just died this morning. She's dead. She's dead. However you want to slice it, Lupe a la Common rap is the muse, and he's down for it no matter what, just like Common was. Common's character met rap as a little girl when he was 10 and was always in love with her. But he never consummates his love with her as she ages. What proceeds to happen through the song is that as her grows, she follows the same trends that rap tends to as well. And those Common's character witnesses giving her everyone else play in some extreme ways that, as she has a voracious sexual appetite, except for him. But they stay close, and even as she grows, experiencing the influence of new genres and experiences, he loves her more, even if he's confused by some of her choices, like dropping Afrocentricity. Eventually, the man gets her ear and ruins her with capitalism and aimless trend hopping. Common's character is beside himself at how much he seems to have fallen, lamenting how many goofies have fucked her. He falls out of love with her. But what he wants to do, in the vein of Resurrection's theme, is restore the feeling he had of her by leading by example in terms of what he wants to see with hip-hop. Lupe's attitude is quite different, though in the next two tracks he seems to wane and get bored of HER, and HER seems bored of him mutually. And his song and attitude is, not only are you undead and been ran through by everyone, totally defiled, I still love you, and I've never been more attracted to you. At a certain point, hip-hop transformed to rap, and rap transformed to trap, and trap transformed to drill, and a million other micro-genres and fusions. Hip-hop is more diverse than it's ever been, and to Lupe, that gut floor is beautiful, and he wants to give it a life of his own. He doesn't see himself as an outsider to what's going on in rap, or on the outside looking in at her like Common. Her has control of him. Lupe's character is seen as the vessel, the art object. She has the gaze, she has the influence and the power over him. It's better this way. The thing about Tetsuo and Youth is that it can be played forwards or backwards. So depending on which way you play it, the story between Lupe's character and rap is that they either get a shotgun wedding complete with honeymoon phase, body of work, get bored of each other, little death, and break up, no scratches. Or they're really careful at the beginning, no scratches, work through their initial honeymoon phase, little death, and then become the ultimate ride or dies, body of work. Either way, fireworks symbolize the fulfillment of desires. After a hiatus from transitioning 4 months in due to an ex wanted me to store my sperm in a cryobank, 2 months later in 2015, I had been back on Spiro and E again. During this time, the resurgence of the newer swelling and growth of my breast came along with something unexpected, and I'm going to be really risque here, so sorry. The clitoralization of my genitalia, at the time anyway. The hormones, after starting new pathways being cut off, were back with a vengeance. That means erections really kind of hurt for a while. What this also meant was that I was extremely sensitive. My skin and hair got extremely soft, even more so than now. The remapping or realignment of the sensory system was honestly pretty heavenly, and the most comfortable I've ever really felt in my body. The orgasms I did have back then were radically different than the ones I'd experienced when I was filled with most of my boy hormones. They felt like fireworks to me, or when you're walking down the beach and even the small hip-level waves can knock you over. Looking back, I remember this was a time where I misguidedly thought that in some abstract way this was a song about transitioning. I think I was projecting to make sense of my own situation at the time. That meaning making too is valid. Hell, Lupe was surprised that people thought that Kick Push was about drug dealing and not about skateboarding. It's moments like that that we as creators discover perspective, expand our field in regards to what not only what art expresses, but what humans experience. It was in its body of work was an obsidian mirror through which I could stare darkly at my development. I didn't feel safe transitioning until I moved out of my mother's house because so often she picked at me for any impulsions and gender nonconformity, especially when I was younger. And to a degree, I guess I can understand. But in my mother's domain, and though I love and appreciate her, I felt stifled, and that added to my depressive tendencies. In body of work, I could see a past image of myself carved out of that repression and depression. I had to take what Jacques Lacan calls, and others have extrapolated in a far more agreeable way, as the feminine way, satisfyingly in order to create a solution, a synthome for myself. Synthome instead of S-Y-M-P, S-M-P-Y-T-O-M. There you go. I can spell, I swear. In order to move on from my life. The background ad-lib vocals of the song, it seemed to be a message from the feminine inside me. A teraphim is a Semitic word that, depending on who you ask, means disgraceful things, or idol, or a household god. Usually the effigy or representation of a past loved one. In a landslide towards Christianity, this fetishism was recuperated and replaced with their own idols, like Mary or Jesus. Like the teraphim maker on the title slide, I had to carve myself using the material of myself. A form of self-love and self-union is what I see transitioning to be. And for a long time, I was afraid and ran from that. I couldn't access it. I was afraid of what my family would think of me. My sister would spy on my internet activities, but she would never bring it up. And when I lived on my own for the first time, I made mistakes. But I also made strides. One of my last times I saw my family in full was in Georgia. Two of my younger sisters lived in Tennessee with my mother, and my other sister, the eldest, lived below me in Atlanta full-time, had a kid. We went to Golden Corral, a buffet restaurant, as we would from time to time when we all lived together. For whatever reason, I decided to wear a denim jacket and a turtleneck I'm actually wearing right now. It's from Zara. My tits were full bloom. I remember that day, and people didn't mention it at the time, but my mother took me aside after dinner and asked me why I never told her. I had my understandable reasons that had to do with our family's dynamic, but for a while I enjoyed having myself to myself. In that day, at that time, I thought it best to reveal myself to people who knew me the longest. She eventually understood. I saw all the statistics about the myriad forms of death and destitution for Black trans women. Especially, I was so close to there presenting, quote unquote, as a man to others. Since then, I've done survival sex work. I've been homeless. I've been stalked. I've been fetishized. I've been tokenized. I've been antagonized, projected on. People have tried to brainwash me. I've been framed, betrayed, everything else but being physically assaulted at this point. To think of myself along the lines of Lupe's muse and body of work as this quad consciousness neo-noir phenomenon was something I had to do to cope with the real plights I've suffered and still could. So I've been doing this for like 10 years. I've had an orchiectomy. I will soon get feminine facialization surgery on my birthday, April 11th. Thank you very much. Don't clap right now, clap later. Whether people think I'm MTF, FT, or FTM, you'd be surprised. FM or whatever, as I come to finally be able to reach what I thought was never possible, a sense of finality or resolution in my gender transition. I feel at peace in the dark, knowing I'm there, more or less, exactly as I wanted, deconstructed and reconstructed. At the end of body of work, for the longest time, I wondered what the vocals before Terrace Martin's solo say. In like one of the only useful things about AI, I managed to use a track splitter a month ago so that I can better hear what is said then. Here's what I hear from inside that mirror. The body is bones and skin. The body is new again. The body is more than bones and gore. And then the rest. I've always loved you, all of you. They'll never love you like I can. I will live forever. Will you cry for me? You and me, are you in? I'll make you pretty. Tell me what to do. Trust me. Love me. And at times, this passage had made me cry, out of sadness or joy, I'm not sure. But it's with the knowledge that whatever this world fails to provide, I can find within in one form or another. No matter what I'm committed to, no matter what, I'm committed to fostering that. I am my own muse, for which I am, of many others, and my own art. And it's an interesting place to be in. Fireworks. And like Stevie Wonder said, I like to think of Terrace Martin's solo as a ribbon in sky for all of us. So with that, play me out, Sam.
Kimberly Alidio is the author of 4 books of poetry, Teeter, which came out from Nightboat Books, Y-letter ellipses from Selva Oscura Press, Once Teeth, Bones, Coral from Belladonna, and After Projects, The Resound from Black Radish Books, as well as Room Tone, Belladonna Chaplet 297, and The Girls in a Joke, 1080 Press newsletter number 19. Please welcome Kimberly.
Pleasure to be here. I'm going to be presenting on a musician who's not personally that important to me. She became important because I prepared this, but it was, I think, a best of new classical music band camp, December, which I discovered Cassandra Miller. So I feel like a lot of her techniques, a lot of her music has generated a lot of writing. And since I'm a writer, sort of interested. Anyway, I have some kind of bond with her. I'm not really sure. We're just going to get into it. Okay. Transformative mimicry is a technique which she uses. She is a Canadian and based in London. I'm going to give you what I think it might be a poetic description of this technique. A singer puts on headphones. The leader song, the source material, enters the ear at a volume, drowning out what will emerge, which is a follower song drawn from the listening body. A singer listens to the leader song enough to listen to the body's impulse to sing along. A composer records the singer singing along to the source material and uses that recording to make a canon, C-A-N-O-N, a piece of music where a melody is played, then looped after a short delay, like a 5-second interval. So, for example, Row, Row, Row Your Boat, or Frère Jacques is a strict canon in which the repeating voices are pretty identical. After a bar or two, they come in. They're identical. That's strict. So Miller, will actually take the kind of singing along and then loop it after a delay into a canon. Okay. The singer puts on headphones. The first canon enters the ear at a volume, drowning out what will emerge, which is a follower song drawn from the listening body. A singer listens to the first canon enough to listen to the body's impulse to sing along. A composer records this singer singing along to the first canon and uses that recording to make a second canon. A singer puts on headphones, repeat 4 or 5 times. A composer makes a song by layering 5 or 6 recordings on top of each other. In Miller's words, the result stands as a snapshot of our iterative process, a document of a ritual-like repeating. Our case study will be the first collaboration with soprano Juliet Fraser. Miller and Fraser have made several songs together in this manner and with this technique, all under the project Tracery. The first one made in 2016, performed in 2018, is called Tracery Lazy Rocking. I'm gonna, I think, have Zach play the source material and then the recorded piece and then a performance of the recorded piece, the composition. So we're going to start with 2016, the source material. The thing that Juliet Fraser is listening to is Ben Johnston's String Quartet number 8, Lazy Rocking, also from 2016. So it is a string quartet. And then we're going to play Juliet Fraser in a recording, and then we're going to look at a video performance of her performing the recording. Yeah, whatever, we'll see. So these are durational works between like 8 minutes to 16 minutes. And in the spirit of live feed, we're going to drop into minute 3, play 30 seconds of each. Random. Go for it, Zach. Okay, in the next piece, this is the piece that Julia Fraser is going to listen to, and then she's going to sing along to this piece. Okay, so something happened. Fraser sings and meditates live, listening to it, while in the speakers a recording consisting of iterations 1 through 6 plays simultaneously. In this film, filmed by Angela Guyton, and Angela Guyton makes a film of all these performances collaboratively. I like that we are watching an interiority and a very close shot of a face unadorned. We are watching someone listening. What I think of then is the minimalism of the handmade, the minimalism of the hidden maximalism, the singular voice that comes out of offset unison. I like music critic Alex Ross's point that this is a different kind of minimalism, with heart, with voice, with humanism, maybe with lyricism. I like that it's a different kind of drone, made by a different kind of repetition, continuousness, looping. So transformative mimicry as a term. There are 3 interrelated questions that Miller asks, and she writes a dissertation, becomes a doctor of music in London. What happens to singing through repeated looping? What happens to singing through repeated looping? What she really means is what happens to melody. What happens during the meditative listening, because that's what Julia Fraser is doing each time. She's doing a body scan, and then she's kind of listening, and that's where the singing along comes from, right? So this meditative listening to an existing song allows a singer to sing from being permeated with song, rather than treating the song as a thing external to herself. And the third question is, what are new experiences of unison, accord, and attunement? Here's Miller's music theory answer, and I'm not at all a musician. Quote, unquote. When singing along to material set in canon, the voice tends to automatically imitate the most prominent gestures of each line. For example, in an 8-voice canon set at 5 seconds, i.e., a melody heard in 8 identical layers, each starting 5 seconds after the previous one, the highest point of the phrase will return 8 times at 5-second intervals, and the listening voice therefore tends to follow this highest gesture up to 8 times in a row. So to define this technique, she says, its mimicking transforms musical material from one thing to another. It's what she hears in the process of Fraser singing. So another quotation. Each of the iterations is several seconds longer than the previous, with the first, the shortest, mimicking most closely the Johnson Quartet, the last, the longest, most distilled and relaxed. With each of the 7 sessions of automatic singing, her voice becomes lower, more relaxed. It loses its distinctive melodic features. The penultimate iteration consists of only low, breathy moans and sighs. So every time she did it, it became more and more like a sigh and less like a melisma. It would get stretched out and have the physicality of her breath. So this interests me, for some reason, maybe because it seems like the question of what is singing, what is song, and what is music, but it's so firmly, so like in the center of new music that it's not actually in doubt that this is music, right? Even though it feels very much like body scan, contemplative practices, maybe even self-help and therapy or some kind of thing. Maybe something we actually do and we sing along. Transformative mimicry seems to allow formal trained singers to investigate their singing impulses. So Juliet Fraser puts aside her bel canto classical training to include all kinds of vocalized noise, breath, and silence into a devised repertoire of automatic singing. The films documenting her performances of Tracery T-Rex and Tracery the Slits not only show pop songs as source material, but they feature giggling, muttering, laughing, and speaking. So in the final iteration, Miller writes, she waited for her body to give her the impulse to vocalize, and this impulse never came. Our last track is silent, except for some faint breathing sounds and the ambient sounds of the room. The making process determined musical form. There was no more melody to be made. So this is where the fantasy I have. I'm interested in the edges of my own fantasy that a singing voice or a poetic voice can endure training and commodification to graduate into autodidactic and autonomous composing. And where I see this, and it'll be the next track, Miller actually is an untrained singer. She's a composer. She does this thing. She does it on her own. She records herself. Her source material is called the Wagoner's Song, Canto di Carrettiere, sung by Domenica Lanza, Baghera, Sicily, 1954, recorded by Alan Lomax and Diego Carpitella. She says, I am making an utterance that is unique to myself on that day at that time, and with a new knowledge learned in each previous iteration. To sing along does not imply copying, quoting, or stealing, but instead implies a togetherness, an accord, an attunement, a listening, an empathetic physical response, and originating from that response, a participating and expressing alongside. The next one. So this is where a high culture idea of a formally rigorous song, a song coming out of contemporary classical experimental new music and music theory, emerges alongside citational, handmade, contemplative, and collaborative processes of composing. Her academic writing and subsequent critical writing, and also I mentioned that her Traveler's Song and Thanks Song 2023 made several best of 2023 lists, is a conversation to me that seems somewhat closed and technical, but it opens up into a shared ground of practice, technique, body, and further into non-performativness and non-virtuosic formalism. So in spite of her academic work to formalize her methodology, she composes high art songs with cultural practices that remain vernacular, relational, and durational. So she uses these machines, of course, recording, transcription, mixing, playback, but her focus is on somatic vocalization and embodied listening. There are a lot of ideas here, and she wrote a dissertation on them. But Alex Ross writes that her heady techniques make songs that remind us how to cry. Other critics follow, identifying with Miller's music a sacredness, an honesty, a rough rawness infused with grace, a hauntology of theory-informed, theory-producing experimental methods. So for me, I take, this interesting thing about transforming and making. Right now, my partner and I are sort of obsessed with the PBS show Craft in America. We just like to watch people make stuff. So when people are making music and they're really all about how they made it and they expose that, I guess it's kind of my thing. What is intersubjectivity as a composing technique? Identity that becomes a living self in the process of transforming in relation to others' perception and interactions, and all to make something other than identity. Beyond just this single, I just play this out for a full minute, it's the last thing. It's become a composing technique for an ensemble. So what we're gonna see now, just a few minutes, there can be 3 musicians who are playing by ear. They're listening also to headphones to Juliet Fraser, and they're playing along on their instruments. They have some rough notation. And then Juliet Fraser comes in, and Cassandra Miller is also singing in this recording. And thank you very much.
So our last presenter for the evening is Amber Flannery Field, who is a former stand-up comedian and the only good tour guide in New York City. She makes video essays on topics such as whiteness, anti-racism, and transness, and runs punk shows at a church. So please give it up for Amber.
Hey, hello, everybody. Thank you, Canopy, I appreciate them letting me have an opportunity to steal their office equipment when they're not looking. So full context of who I am, I'm internet famous, which is the type of famous where you're still on food stamps. And I'm gonna look at my list here. Sorry about that. And my kind of tagline is I'm the only good tour guide in New York City. That's kind of my hook as a thing, which is true because most other tour guides are awful. One time I was at a guide convention and some guy, they have them, they're the worst. Just imagine your worst teacher. Imagine the type of person who couldn't make it as a teacher, so now they're a tour guide, right? I'm trans, so I have an excuse, right? Nobody else wants me. But a Holocaust survivor got up and gave a presentation on New York City history. And then all these old goobers started correcting a guy who went through the Holocaust about facts about the Holocaust. I'm even if you're right, he's wrong on a higher level than you are. This is gonna be a story about, I think probably where violence is. And as a tour guide, I work with student tours. And one time I had 92 12-year-old girls, which is the evilest thing. Have you met 12-year-old girls? They're horrible. And I was in the hotel lobby and I was watching just all the universals swirl around each other, and they were being brutal to each other. I mean, it's typical 12-year-old girl shit of best friends who secretly hate each other, another one who's talking shit about them all the time. And I watched all this violence as they velociraptor each other, And I realized like the problem wasn't in the room. It was back in Austin, the white suburbs of Austin, Texas, where they come from, where it was the boys. The problem was misogyny. And like I saw this today on one of my student tours, where like I always ask the girls to tell me like what the drama of the school is, and it's always like the boys would always play the girls off of each other to the point where they didn't even have to be in the room for the girls to do their work on their behalf, right? And that might be a metaphor for later. And I'm internet famous, which I don't care about. The thing where people know me that matters to me is I'm also like a quote unquote punk mom for a small niche punk community inside of New York City. There's multiple different punks communities in New York, and this community is about a constituency of 200 to 500 kids, and it shifts all the time. And right now I'm just focusing on like a smaller number of kids. And this community, to quote one of the children, Tolly, who's my third favorite one, he's watching this. Stop being mad at Lily. I'm right. He's mad at Lily. This community is born under the anger of children under COVID. Like 2020 happens, and then like I think people don't understand how much we robbed these kids of their childhood and how much like we owe them like the entire world because we took so much away from them. And these kids started in 2020 doing like park shows in the park because it's like the height of COVID. And then cops started like, the park police started cracking down on them, and then like the police started cracking down on them. There was like one dramatic show. We all know Fort Greene, right? I don't have to describe that to you. I want to tell it to other people. So it's on the top of a crest of a hill, and like all the cops descended at them on all sides. And that was kind of like a turning point in the scene where they got driven to DIY shows. And that drove up segregation inside of the scene because the DIY venues that he had to do was like about $700. So only like Park Slope Dave could do these shows, and he would be the one curating it. And it was also a bit of a racist geography where it was like in hipster areas where the kids from the Bronx couldn't get really around there. And it attracted like just the annoying white cis-het bros who would be there to drink and fight. And so like that would attract the cops and make it less hospitable for like the kids of color who wanted to be there. Cut to me, I'm in my church, and there's this child at my church who is the worst child. And he started out like this. He's, right? You know what I'm talking about, yeah. Sorry, that's a teenager over there. So like as I knew this child, he was like this, and now he's like this big, and he has like this hair. He's like that's his energy. I just want to live in the woods. Why? It's just freedom. Because you grew up here. That's why. So he's like, Amber, in light of everything I just told you, he's like, Amber, there's no punk community in New York City anymore. And like I've done organizing, Jesus Christ, for like 20 years at this point. So I'm older than I look. And like, I'm like, well, Burke, why don't we just do a show here? It's like, Amber, this is the best. You get gay boys in bondage to play. I'm like, okay, that's one of the bands. They're good. They broke up. But like, afterwards, asking me about the lore of a bunch of teenagers. I have a whole Degrassi in my head all the time. And so here's my kind of organizing philosophy nowadays, right? You can't start a union with a strike. Right? And I think that's what like people look at political problems, and if they don't have experience in dealing with them, they're just like, oh, we're gonna form ACT UP Part 2 in 3 days, and then we're gonna take over the entire world, and every single one of our grievances will be addressed, right? That's not how it happens. It's piecemeal. No matter how radical you are, it's still one thing at a time. And that's how we approached it. It was like we did one show, and then we did 2 shows. And with our first show, we started off was, I just had a zine, not that one, but I mean, spoiler. I had a zine about how to organize, and then we just had 7 bands play, and about like 168 kids showed up. We did one thing, and then after that, what you do is you do a second thing, and we escalated a little. And I brought in this black non-binary person named Mohawk, who like they have this hair. There's a theme here. A lot of people have this hair, but like it's a punk community, whatever. And they did Narcan training. So that way these kids, for me, it's not just these kids know how to do Narcan, but it's also that they will look at the world in a different way. Where you see a homeless person on the street, that's a job. That's a person that you take care of. That's a person you need to be in affinity with. Like that's the small escalation. And we did that show, and it was another success. And so we did one thing, and then we did 2 things. And then after that, I listened to the kids. Like I sat them down and we had a group meeting, and one of these kids, they were black, and they said, hey, Amber, I'm not seeing a bunch of people like me in these shows. What are we going to do about it? So I put them in charge with this other band that was like an all POC band. And from like a lot of different coffees and a lot of different conversations, the structure of it was an hour-long discussion with the kids that was led by the kids about desegregation inside of New York City's punk scene, plus a show with like 6 bands that sounded like shit. They're high school kids. Like they're not good, but like I like them. I like Mind Over Matter. But like Gay Boys and Garbage were good, and Cut-Ups. But Cut-Ups are great. Why am I telling all the bands? This is being recorded. You have to mute all these. Okay, never mind. So they did that, and they had like artist market and like other like side things. And then we did 1 show, and then we did 2 shows. And for the second show, I brought in this black trans organizer who I know, and I asked her for like input. And she was like, wow, Amber, this is so amazing. This is like a diverse bunch of kids of color. Everybody's queer. They're all like any pronouns, or, you know, all kids are fucking faggots these days. I hate it. But like all these kids are queer. Quick question, Amber, where are the trans women? And that was a question, like you can hear what that question is, right? That was a question that I was not mature enough to answer. I think at that point I was probably like 1.5 years into transition. And what she was telling me was something that was true, which is like really complicated and really hard to unpack. And this is their community. I don't want to speak on behalf of their community, but there is a problem with like trans misogyny inside of like the most woke thing that would look great on TikTok. Like they would have, people would try to run shows that were like all AFAB shows. That's like an inappropriate thing to do because it excludes literally trans women. But like, you know, it's really, I see this with some of these kids, is like, it's hard to confront the fact that society deals you different cards than what everybody else did. And there's some gaping maw of horror that you will get violence that is just unfair. And for trans women, it's called trans misogyny. And for like my first 1.5 years, because of trans misogynistic crap I had in my head, I refused to admit that to be myself. Like, I would be around tables with friends, like stupid, like high school, no, they were like adults, but like, you know, like you're just like, I read this book about trans stuff. And I adapted like this philosophy of like, I don't do trans homework assignments, right? Because like, I just don't want to read. First of all, have you read? It's the stupidest thing. I'm sorry I made you guys zines, but like it's just don't ever read. If you have one lesson here, just don't like, we're going to take all these books and we're going to burn. No. Is that okay? Could that be an art thing? No. So like, I was insecure and I was refusing to cop to this violence that was in front of me, to the point where like it came at the expense of like what was happening inside of the scene. And it wasn't until, okay, this is going to be like a bombshell, but like I'm just going to skip over it because like I got a lot of tranny trauma hour shit. But like I gave a kid up for adoption, like, I don't know, about 12 years ago, and he's fine. And after I came out of the closet about 2 years ago, I came out to the parents, and these like good Obama liberals, they closed the adoption and shut off all contact with my son. And my kid does not know that I'm a trans woman. So like that was an event that was so trans-misogynistic that I couldn't not be in denial anymore, right? I had to confront this violence that's in front of me. And I was sitting in the living room of one of my friends, and I was like hugging a pillow, and I was crying. And I turned to them, and I said, I think that there might be a thing in this world called trans-misogyny. And then my friend went to a bookshelf and got the Keystone book on trans-misogyny, which is called Whipping Girl, and they pulled it out of the shelf, and they put it in my lap, and they said, that's why you do the trans homework assignments. And I started to understand myself more. And then after that fact, I reached out to a kid, and her name is Julie, and she was a trans girl. And she was like the one who would like always like all my Instagram, all the kids follow me on this, it's weird. You know, can you just DM a child and hang out with it? You could do that. Nobody stop, you're breaking no rules. Nobody, you're avoiding eye contact. Okay, you're nervous. I don't know. The she-mail was weird. So I messaged this kid and I have coffee with her. And the premise is like, I'm going to, like the same model with these like Punks of Color shows, you know, I could do this with trans kids. And the trans kid in front of me was a fucking evil nightmare. She was the prettiest little cunt. Her name's Julie. She's my favorite person. And she told me a couple of things. One thing is I said the word faggot in front of her, and she corrected me and said that you shouldn't say the word faggot. That inside of like, I'm making a call here that people might not agree with, but inside of queer etiquette, she took a very conservative thing, and like I take a more liberatory opinion. And she had a lot of other very conservative opinions like that. She was obsessed with the cis teen girls. Like she was a room full of 92 12-year-old girls, right? Like that's how she was. And she also told me a story of when she was 14 years old, she went to school with anime clothes underneath her boy clothes. She snuck into the bathroom and came out as a full girl for school. And then on the subway ride home, like this kid made me nervous. They made me scared. Just like looking at the political violence that created this conservatism, because she, at her school, like the faggiest school in all of New York City, it's like one of these art schools. There's like 1,400 kids. She testified to me there's only like 10 trans femme kids out of all these like out they fabs and like non-binary kids and forever, whatever. That's how she told me it. A little bit later, one of the kids said like, she was lying to you. There's only like 2 trans kids. And so like, there's not enough kids to build like a foothold of a community. All I have is just the coffee I have in front of this child. Like I am looking at the trans community with this kid, and like what I understood was that act of going into a janitor's closet and changing clothes, that's a thing Superman does. And this child in front of me, in spite of all her conservatism, that's a survival technique that she adapted in order to be Superman, right? Like this kid was like amazing. And I invited her to my first punk show, on her first punk show that she ever went in her entire life, on October 28th, 2023. By December 2023, that's how many months? Like 2, I can't do math, I'm bad at it. But like by December, she sent me, she's a good writer, and I read most of the stuff she wrote. She sent me an essay on what's it like being a punk and a goth after being punk for 3 months long. Like, it was so embarrassing that I couldn't read it. Like, I couldn't get past the first paragraph. It was embarrassing. So I did this is a key like for childcare. You lie to children, right? I lied to her and I said like, wow, I read it. That was a really good story. And then she goes, what was your favorite part, Amber? And I'm like, shit. So like, I don't have it. I probably should have brought it. Like I made her whole essay instead of reading it. I just turned it into this very stylistic zine. And then I gave it to her as a Christmas present. And that was on December 23rd. So October 23rd, 2023, she was at her first punk show. December 2023, she's like writing zines about how punk she was. February 2024, she was dead. She was dead. And I think I was underestimating how hard that would be to say. And so you guys are going to carry with me in a second. And okay, this is going to be the thing. You can do 5 minutes while I'm trying to look for this stuff. I'm sorry, I don't mean to pick on you, but you're just a thing. Anime clothes. Yeah, she was dead. I'm not here to litigate her death. And I'm going to put up a strong rule here where whatever information you hear, you're not litigating it either, because this is matters that you're now 2 people removed from, and it's a complicated matter, and I'm just smarter and prettier than you, so I'm just making a rule that like is not being litigated. She was called out like by the kids in the community, and people asked her to be ostracized by the community, and the language that was used was trans misogynistic language. I'm not going to say what it was, but at the same time, there could have been stuff that instigated that, right? It's a very, very complicated matter. And around the same time, that black trans organizer that I brought up earlier, who got Julie in front of me, like that was the inspiration of it, she and another Black trans woman was like subject to a call out of similar type in the community. And in both instances, I'm gonna, give me 2 seconds. This is dramatic and not me remembering. So people hurt other people, and we work with the tools that we have. And teens hurt other teens. And these kids have no other tools other than to use really carceral, aggressive means, such as asking for a child to be ostracized from their own community. And the school system, they're like, carceral ways of dealing with things makes a lot of sense. So these kids did a very carceral thing of like ostracize the most marginalized kid inside of our community from this community. And then the school system's like, well, we're gonna punish those kids who did the bullying, who did the cyberbullying, when like they were very likely doing what they thought was best to protect their own selves and their own community, right? There's no clean answers here. Like it's a very difficult thing. But at the same time, like inside of a lot of this like call out culture, which I don't want to sound like Joe Rogan and stuff like that, but it's just like, it's a tool we have to use, and it's easiest to reach towards the most vulnerable people because it's carceral, so it's centered on purity. And so what people really say and what they say in these call outs is that these people aren't white. These people aren't cis, right? This trans girl is targeting cis women. This Black trans woman is animalistic, right? We have to cast these out of our communities because we have to cast out anything that's not whiteness. And that's dangerous and weird. When I did community organizing, I was told to always end with a call to action. And like what that means is to tell people where to find power, right? And I think that's absent. Like everybody's a leftist nowadays, right? Everybody's got that strong opinions. Everybody knows to not drink at McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever. And I think what we do is we make a long curated list of like where we don't have power. And there's weird distortions where like people, I saw a TikTok that bothered me. And it's just a fucking TikTok, but I got a lot of views. But someone said like, if Taylor Swift came to the side of Palestine tomorrow, the conflict would end. That's a delusional thing to say, right? That's not right. That's something that's like so very online. And a lot of people are like, oh no, that's how it is. And like, I feel that what's happening right now is Israel is acting very retributive. They're acting carceral. They're aggrieved. And so there's this philosophy that makes sense that we're seeing floating around, which is that when we vanquish the enemy, then our problems will be addressed. When we get rid of that one predator, all of our problems will be addressed. When Taylor Swift comes in with her sword and like cuts down the Israeli government, like all our problems will be addressed. And it's so weird because I want to contrast that with George Floyd, right? The lessons of George Floyd, which is about not retribution, but restoration and everything like just being healed. It's like we learned the lyrics of George Floyd, but we didn't learn the chords and how to play the song. And that's just something that's a weird situation that we're in that I find myself immersed in because like everything that's in front of me right now, this is something that happened a month ago, right? I went to a funeral less than a month ago. And it's just like a thing I see in my feed. It's a thing I see in the news. It's a thing I see in my peers inside the trans community. It's the thing I see in these fucking kids, right? And it's weird. And we can do better. And just give me a second. The story, you always end with a call to action. It's always about where is power. It's not about listing where you don't have power. It's not about listing the long list of celebrities who are Zionists. God forbid. It's like fucking, what's her name? Fucking piano person. It's just like, oh no, Billy Joel's a Zionist. Like what? He's not a senator. Like fucking, I don't know. It just drives me crazy. And it's just like, this is a story. Like it's about like, I'm always about like, where do we find power? And like what I've testified to you is about like a scared, hurt, confused kid who like couldn't find power. And like for me to condemn this like punks of color community is to say that the people who are inside of it don't matter. And this idea that like there can be this pure community that's like beyond any type of marginalization or any type of violence that's not a shadow play of the people who are above us, right? That's not ever gonna happen. You're only gonna find power through messy people. Back when I was an organizer, you know, like I had this fucking mentor who used to say that Dr. King, he was dramatic, Dr. King was a homophobic womanizer, and that's a good thing because that means that broken people can bring about change like you and me. And that's like something I center on. And my first reaction to Julie's death, like I get it, was anger, right? I got very angry. I made a long list in my head of people to get angry at. And then immediately afterward, I thought of action, like the little Rolodex fucking community organizer in my head of like, oh, we should do these community events, that'll help like solidify. But like, no, like all those fucking suck because they're at the expense of Julie, right? And when you're angry at someone, when you're retributive, when you're about like vanquishing the enemy, then it flattens your victim to this perfect little angel. When Julie was a fucking messy, I'm sorry, I forgot this was being recorded. When this kid was a very, very messy kid, and that's the level that she should be appreciated at, right? That's the level that she should be loved at. And making it about like vanquishing or anger makes it about you finding every excuse to not focus on mourning and loving and memorializing people that matter. I sometimes use this as a frame. Blowing up cop cars in a protest. Anyone here? No? You? No? You keep on avoiding eye contact. I don't know if you're like just socially anxious or just, listen, I don't know. This isn't stand-up comedy. I got blackballed from that. Why do you, ask in your head, I'm not asking for answers, like your head, you got smart people face, like, why do you burn a cop car in a protest? Right? Is it because there's one too many cop cars in a protest and we just get rid of this one cop car and then all of a sudden all of our problems are going away forever? No, it's a political instrument. It's propaganda. It's this idea that the state has this monopoly of violence. It's the one that can execute people. It's the one that can throw the bombs. It's the one that, you know, make your long list in your head of what you've seen in your own eyes. And the idea that we can have this power over an instrument of the state breaks that illusion. And people do not opt in to systems of change unless they feel like they can change. So it's a siren call. I'm not saying to burn cop cars. I'm not saying not to burn cop cars. I'm just saying that's what it is. It's just like people don't opt into systems of change unless they feel like they can change. And it's like you end with a call to action. It's always about action. And I think that's what's absent from this performance of leftism, this posture of having the right opinion online. That doesn't matter if you're not bringing about action. And you can bring about change. That's the conceit of leftism, is collectively we all can have power, and it might be annoying, tedious, and shitty, but you have power. Julie had power. I, with 8 coffees with a trans teenager, changed her life and made the last couple of months in her life comfortable. And like, I think like that's my call to action. It's picayune, but like that's all I fucking got. You know what I mean? Because I'm fucking mourning and I can't be doing action. I can't be running at the wall because I have to be doing mourning. But like your job after like, you know, the way the kid's job is to look at homeless people with empathy is just think of somebody who you're not connected with. Like we're barely at the revolution, right? We're not there. You have to be building community first. And that's not like, it's not these fucking, you're not auditioning for the future documentary of the revolution. Right now, it's fucking baby steps, right? Just think of somebody who you're not fully connected with, who you want to connect with. Reach out for them, ask them to have coffee, and just have a conversation. And that's all I got. Yeah, I'm sorry. That went a little more intense than it. Well, I mean, I went in knowing it was going to be about dead kids, so I don't know. Thank you. Also, I have, if you guys look in the back, I have this new Signal chat that will show you a picture of a horse every day at 3 p.m. If anybody, yeah.